Welcome to Microdose Psychedelic Insights, powered by the Conscious Fund. This is the Incognito series, casual psychedelic conversations on cognitive liberty.
Cool. Okay, so I've hit the record button. So Mr. Cody Shirk, thanks for coming on today. I hope we have more luck now on this platform than the one we were using 20 minutes ago. Didn't go too well. Appreciate you joining us. Would you mind just sort of introducing yourself and telling us a little bit more about what you're doing?
Absolutely. First of all, Patrick, thanks for letting me be the first guinea pig on your new show. And yeah, quick background. My name is Cody Shirk. I currently live in Florida. I'm from the Los Angeles area in California. My connection to psychedelics is long in terms of knowing about them, knowing how they interact with people, and also from the business side as an investor and now entrepreneur in the industry. And I'm looking to build solutions for people using psychedelic medicine, mostly from the data and tech side, because I'm not a scientist. So I'm trying to approach this in a way that I actually understand. And you know, if you look at any industry right now in the world to be involved in, this is certainly at the top of the list of most exciting right now, because this is something that can provide real impact to literally millions, if not billions of people right now.
Big time. And so what were you doing before, your entrance into the psychedelic arena? Do you want to just tell us more about how you saw that intersection?
Out of school, I became a firefighter in the Los Angeles area, and that job, being a firefighter in that area, is vast majority of the emergency calls you go on are medical emergencies. I was on a ALS, Advanced Life Support fire engine. And, we would go on all kinds of calls that would range from, stabbings and murders and all kinds of crazy, scary stuff. But one of the things we ran into a lot was people with mental health issues. And these were veterans that were homeless. These were people that were battling addiction. These were people that had gone through, horrible events ranging from, rape to anything you can think of. And we would go on these people on emergency calls because they were struggling. And the solutions that they were being provided were abysmal. They were horrible. And it's not necessarily a critique on the medical system or anything as a whole. It's just that we haven't figured out something real to help these people with mental health problems. So I approached this industry kind of backwards a little bit, meaning I saw the real world problems that people were struggling with, and then saw the band-aids that were trying to be put on these issues. And I think we can all say with confidence that the band-aids that exist out there don't really solve anything. And a lot of times they make it much, much worse. So seeing that from that perspective kind of, immediately kind of raised my antenna, my ears, going, hey, there's this big problem that's affecting millions of people throughout the world, if not billions of people. And we don't really have a solution other than these band-aids of pharmaceutical drugs, of therapy, of all these different random things that weren't really helping people. And then later in my career, when I was in my late 20s, I had some personal challenges, had some pretty crazy, gnarly, graphic things happen to me that I had real problems digesting. And that's when I realized, like, wow, there's, even for me, well, I thought I was a pretty mentally balanced, stable person. I was like, I'm having trouble digesting what I just experienced. What are the options here? And the options were, the department that I was working with basically said, hey, you've got to take these pharmaceutical pills or you're fired. And luckily at the time I had been investing on the side, so I wasn't financially in an emergency. And I kind of looked at this and I said, well, you're going to fire me if I don't take these pills? Like, that is the craziest thing ever. And I basically said, okay, fine, I'm out. I'm done. I'm gone. And that was, it was terrifying for me, because I left a steady paycheck, which is one of the most addicting things in the world. I left that, but I had this big question, like, in my head, like, what? There's got to be a better solution than this. And if I experienced this on a very, I guess, with very little downside risk for me, meaning I could still put food on the table, what about other people? How do people coming back from war? How do people who just, got raped? How do people that were abused by children? How do they figure this out? And they don't have a safety net. They don't have a way to put food on the table and bring happiness to your lives. So as soon as I personally experienced that, I went, holy crap, this is a much, much bigger issue. So I kind of started, oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's interesting that, like a lot of the times in the industry, we hear about the personal experience that, drew people into the industry and really opened their eyes to it. But I find it fascinating that you kind of had that layer of perspective beforehand, but then really the personal experience that you went through reinforced what you already knew in a sense.
Yeah. And I think the unique thing about that is that, I'm a white American dude that was a firefighter. It's kind of like that, like America, and I'm that total stereotype that would be anti-drug or against that, just because you think that, or when you think of someone who's against drugs, like my face is there, or who I was or who I am. And the fact that I approached this through a way that was not only personal, but I actually saw it in real life, I think speaks more to the fact that I'm pursuing this industry not because I think it's cool, or not because it's exciting or it's a drug. It's like I'm approaching this because I think it's a real solution to a real problem our world has right now. And I'm sure a lot of people are approaching this industry the same way, but I would also say a lot of people are approaching this industry because they had a cool psychedelic trip, or they had a cool mind expanding experience. And that's great, but it means you're approaching the industry a little bit differently, maybe from a recreational perspective versus a medical perspective. And no matter how you approach the industry, it's great. We need lots of people to jump in and help, but it's certainly unique to approach it through a way when you realize, hey, this is for real help for real problems.
Yeah. And have you found that kind of perspective and having that experience has shaped some of your business decisions and what you're doing in the space and what you're trying to provide?
Absolutely. And I think I'll just say it, is that there's a big conflict going on right now in the cannabis and psychedelics industry. And that conflict is that we've talked about this before, on personal calls. Yeah, but it's like the idealists versus the capitalists. That's what I call it. It's the idealists, which are people that are, I say, the OGs of the industry that have spent years and years fighting for decriminalization, have been researching all types of things, and they have this dream of how the industry is going to unfold. And that dream is probably, like, it's ideal, it's the best way to do it, but is that really going to happen in practice? I don't think so. The other side of the spectrum is you have these capitalists coming in, and they're just looking to make as much money as possible, spin up a company, go public, cash in, and then take the money and run. And looking at both sides of the spectrum, there's probably an answer somewhere in between to push the industry forward. But yeah, it's very complicated right now, and that's a big problem within the industry. That's going to be, I think, in the next several years, it's going to be a big issue. But that's like any industry, that's going to happen. And
exactly. Yeah.
And honestly, that's healthy, because that's how the best companies, the best people rise to the top, and the people and who have underlying agendas, they'll get washed out. And we're seeing that right now in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing it happen faster in the psychedelics industry because there is this level of I've seen this film before. I know who the villain is, I know who the hero is, and one thing that I always remark on, this discussion is prevalent. It happens all the time. It's, what can we do to harmonize the two worlds? Because everybody kind of takes this versus context, and maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be. You look at success and failures and there's always this relation to the cannabis industry, and it's, maybe not an exact parallel, but it is an emerging market, that was recently legalized. It's highly regulated. It's, a substance that has gone from counterculture to mainstream, maybe not the same societal implications, but if you look at it from an industrial framework, there's a lot of similarities, right? And,
oh yeah.
I think if we saw something like this being mediated in advance, like maybe if the master growers and these, stock guys actually got together and made a real company with real business, it could have been a better result. And I think we're starting to see
for sure. And that's one good thing about psychedelics, is that there is a higher barrier to entry. Like, you can fake it with cannabis. You can say, like, oh, I'm going to roll up a bunch of joints and make a brand and then sell the joints and Do those joints provide some type of medical or mental relief for people? Yeah, they probably do. But the company itself is much more of a CPG, consumer packaged good company that's just trying to bank off of a cool logo. Whereas psychedelics, like, it's pretty difficult to enter the market unless you have some real science and research and serious money to get through a lot of these hurdles. So yeah, there's much more biotech spin with the psychedelics industry, which is good because you're going to have, again, a higher barrier to entry. So hopefully more qualified people, but you're still going to have a lot of those others that are going to mess it up. But to be fair to that,
you're always going to have hucksters in life.
Yeah. But to be fair to that, like, one thing that I have a problem with still with psychedelics is that, first of all, I believe psychedelics are a solution for an enormous amount of people that are struggling through a variety of issues. However, it's an extremely unapproachable industry. When you look at psychedelics, when you look at the products and services that are currently offered, the vast majority are targeted towards a demographic that is maybe not used to expanding their mind, forget that term, but it's not necessarily positioned to the business executive that lives in a white picket fence neighborhood with 2.5 kids and dog. It's more positioned to, say, like the millennial that's out of college and doing the digital nomad thing. And so perhaps some of that capitalist side will open the eyes of those people that wouldn't normally approach this industry. And perhaps that will bring in a new flood of consumers, customers, clients who will be using services and products in the psychedelics industries that would never have approached it before because they think it's for, these backpacking hippies around the world. And I hate to use that stereotype, but I think
maybe it is too. Yeah. But I think there's a seat for everybody at the table in this industry, which is the truly remarkable thing.
Totally.
So that kind of helps us segue. So the way I'm trying to approach this podcast, I guess I probably should have explained it at the beginning of the podcast, but here we are doing the thing. So basically going to try and go like 10 minutes on psychedelics and intro, 10 minutes on sustainability, and then 10 minutes on kind of the capital theme, which is the art of being incognito. So, this natural segue into sustainability kind of works here. So when I say, sustainability, and I'm directly relating it to the psychedelic industry without any kind of prompt or forward, what comes to your mind, when you're thinking about that?
Yeah, it's funny. I played water polo in college, and water polo is it's a swimming sport. You can't touch the bottom of the pool, so it's like you're basically fighting with other people for like 2 hours straight.
Yeah,
and and it's a strange analogy, but basically like you have to stay sustainable or else like you're gonna drown. So you have to start the game off with the plan of like still floating at the end of the game so you can breathe. All the while getting like punched in the face during that time, which is kind of like the entrepreneur's journey. You're just getting the royal beat down for years. Yeah. So when I think of sustainability, I think about taking like a real rational approach. And we already talked about it just a little bit ago, the idealist versus the capitalist. Whatever end of the spectrum people are on, I think you have to consider the other side. It's that saying, balancing two ideas at the same time, even though you may disagree with one of them. You've got to do that in order to be sustainable, in order to be able to push through all those tough things. And I think that's going to happen. Again, in the psychedelics industry, unfortunately, over the next couple of years, there's going to be some really frustrating times. There's going to be a lot of those, punches in the face, a lot of those, decriminalization efforts, a lot of the things that we hope are going to unfold perfectly, they're not going to happen. So in order for us to be sustainable, no matter how you're pushing an industry, I think you have to think of like, okay, I'm in this game, and if I don't save some energy and look at the other side of the perspectives, like I'm going to drown. So I got to be prepared for all that.
Yeah, no, I actually really like that analogy. It's very practical, and I mean, it's, it truly does, harken to the entrepreneur's journey, whether you're, a startup or, even a startup company with 100 employees and you're killing it until you're not, it happens. And I think it's people that are best transitioned to, be flexible and dynamic in those situations and, really just keep pushing the goalposts after getting knocked down. Like, how long did it take Rick Doblin to get, to where he is with MAPS and the FDA?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Rick started MAPS in 1986. I think. So, so we're
while we're chatting.
Yeah, that's a long time to be pushing on an issue with relatively little traction for years, for decades. And probably within the past couple of years, he's really started to have success. I mean, we just had the big capstone raised that was successful, incredibly $30 million in I don't know how many days, but it was just under 2 months, I believe. On top of that, hundreds of millions of dollars of private funding going into private companies and to nonprofits. But this has only happened the past couple of years. Meanwhile, Rick's been working on this for decades, and then just recently had this success.
Yeah.
So talk about sustainability.
The overnight success, and now you're in Forbes, and now it's like, well, and you were right, 1986. That is decades of hard work being put into something.
I don't want to date myself.
Still not there yet.
Yeah, I think you're younger than me. I was born in '85, so like I'm like, holy crap! Rick was at this when I was like literally in diapers. That's crazy. And
I wasn't even a thought on the dance floor yet.
If we didn't have Rick, imagine we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now. And Rick obviously is on the I don't know what you want to call it, the Hall of Fame of psychedelics right now. But there's dozens of other people right now that we can think of, and I don't want to ignore those people because they've been pounding their head against a concrete wall for years too, waiting for some type of success. But when you talk about the sustainability thing, we're certainly not to a point where the industry is sustainable. We're going to have a lot more of the beating our heads on this concrete wall for a while. And again, we just have to think of Rick and those guys and ladies that have done so much work and try and keep that into perspective.
For sure. And so, if we're sitting here and we're talking and we're actively involved in the industry and we know what's going on, but if you look at, somebody that's looking in from another industry, wanting to get involved, anything like that, what would you, recommend to them if they're truly trying to get involved in a long-term capacity and this is a passion, this is, something that's calling them in life? What's the best way to set yourself up for long-term sustainable success for everyone else?
Yeah, I think there's several things, but two things that jump out really quickly. Number one is do not enter it unless you have like a crazy passion for it, because this industry, similar to cannabis, is you're involved in things that are technically illegal. When we're talking about the substances, most of the companies, you can start a company and be legal with that, but when you start handling the substances, you need special licenses and you need special permission. And there's not really any other industry I can think of like that, where you're dealing with something that is so highly regulated that it's nearly impossible to even do with it. So if you don't have the passion, you're going to get burned out on the frustration of having to deal with all these, mother may I type things, may I do this, may I do that? Whereas like you could just, start a shirt company and like no one cares what you're doing with your t-shirts. So I would say the first thing is the passion part. Like you really got to be dedicated to it. But the second thing,
perseverance, I guess.
Yeah. Just taking a beat down for years and being okay with that. But the second thing that I think is super exciting is the industry is still so new, and you can like pretty much think of anything and apply it to psychedelics and probably be one of the first, if not the first people approaching the industry with that idea. For example, you could start a consulting firm that helps with job placement, be a recruiter in the psychedelics industry. I know that you and I both individually, our companies are kind of working on that type of stuff, but if you think about it, the average pay to be a researcher or scientist in the psychedelics industry is big time money. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in salary. And if you're a recruiter, that's big time money to be making.
No name brand for that yet.
Yeah. And so there's dozens of those types of opportunities I look at. And if you're an entrepreneur looking into this industry, you can say, oh, I can pursue an ancillary type role where you're not actually involved with the drugs. It's kind of like the ancillary picks and shovels approach that so many people have done in the cannabis industry. And you can do that right now with psychedelics. And
it worked.
Yes. Right. It worked. It worked better than a lot of companies.
Yeah. Better than most of the plant touching companies. Yeah. Revenue positive, demand, inbound,
Totally.
Yeah. It worked.
And I see that right now with psychedelics. I see so many opportunities. And of course, no matter what happens, entrepreneurship is it's a grind and the odds are stacked against you. But when you're entering an industry that not only is trending upwards with people's awareness, but actual legislation is changing and laws are changing. And there's very little competition. You look at that and you go, that's pretty interesting if you were to pick like the perfect scenario of huge upside with not much competition.
Yeah, the only other thing you could ask for is a small loan of $1 million to get things started.
Yeah, that's a problem. But I think, you know, for somebody who does have that problem, meaning they need funding to take their idea off the ground, it's going to be tough right now, but in the coming years, I think there's going to be a flood of private and public money coming into this industry because we as a society are realizing we got a problem with mental health, and this whole COVID pandemic thing has put an exclamation point behind this problem and has made it so blatantly obvious that we as a world need to address this, because it goes beyond just, let's help people's, you know, mental health. It goes to the point of, hey, if we don't get our mental health in line, like, we can't have productive people in society, and our society can't be moving forward solving problems. We're battling ourselves. We need to be, you know, battling external problems like, you know, space travel and climate stuff, all that type of thing. That's the problems we need to be tackling, not like arguing with our own brains.
Exactly. If we can get ourselves sorted out, maybe we'll even get delicious airline food one of these things. So that's a great segue into roughly 10 minutes of the conversation around being incognito. So I'm just going to kind of read this because I know that incognito is probably going to make people think about browser tabs, and it's actually quite the opposite, the definition I'm going for here. It's the philosophical principle that one's existence is demonstrated by the fact that one thinks. So it's really the intellectual self-process of the ego. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that to you, what does it mean to you, you know, to be incognito, to be in this process of self-discovery? And, you know, like you mentioned, what's it going to mean for the world when more people can do this and find this self-actualization?
That's a heavy question. And I think
that's why we save it for the end.
Yeah, I think it's particularly heavy because we're in a time period right now, meaning this pandemic and people being like stuck in their home or separated from family, separated from friends. They've had to deal with themselves, and they've had to get comfortable with who they are, what personal challenges they're experiencing, and what their future looks like. And, you know, confronting those problems is freaking hard. It's so hard, and you don't know that challenge exists until you get there, and then when you get there, you don't know how to deal with it. So when you talk about, you know, being incognito and you know, being able to balance these different things going on in your life, it's one of those like housekeeping things that I think a lot of us are being confronted with right now. So when I think of it personally, I really think about I guess it's kind of like the stoicism, the stoic approach, where you know, you believe that you approach problems in a rational way, where it's a problem for you to solve. It's not your problem. It's not a problem that controls you. Yeah, it's you are approaching something and you're going to figure it out. It's a puzzle. Unfortunately, you know, our world is so controlled by media from both sides, from all sides, from countries, from political parties, from religious factions, from everything. We're being persuaded all over the place. And before this pandemic, people were just kind of going to the flow. I call them sheeple. It's just like, I'm a sheep. I'm just going to go with whatever happens. And then we all got separated from our, you know, our communities, and we got stuck in our homes, and we started thinking like, oh my God, like this is like, what was I doing? Or how do I change the way that I go forward? And I think the way to do that is by being able to look at facts, being able to look at problems and weigh them and try and move forward in a way that where you don't get so emotionally invested that you're not making that wise decision. So I think that was a really kind of high level answer to what you're asking, but I think that's a really big thing that we as a society have lost, which is that critical thinking, and instead we're thinking based upon the messages that are jammed in front of our faces. Psychedelics, you know, to bring it back to that, I think for me personally is one of the biggest benefits of psychedelics is that it removes you from having that perspective that is being, channeled on you. You have this perspective, you take psychedelics, and all of a sudden you have this different perspective, and you go, oh my God, what was I thinking last month or last week? I was such an idiot, or I was so rude to this person. It makes you want to like call up people, call your parents. Oh my God, mom, dad, I love you. You've done so much for me. How did I not realize that earlier? It makes you want to call somebody, 2 years ago you had a blowout with. You realize that they had a perspective that was probably, more correct than yours, and you want to say, oh man, I'm sorry. And I think that Incognito, theory of being able to balance all those things is something that will help all of us move forward more in a more healthy way.
Yeah, and almost like in a more removed from not only, what other people are thinking, but really what you're thinking about yourself. We were on a documentary production a couple weeks ago in Mexico, and we were talking with a gentleman named Anders Beatty, and he had a really good point, in that a lot of the mental health issues that are plaguing society today, and a lot of the deeply unrooted happiness, and it can be traced back to expectations of what you're supposed to be. Society's expectations of, I got to get this degree, then get this job, then get this, and then I'll be happy, and then I'll be there, and then I can self-actualize and help other people. Whereas I think, we're kind of learning day in, day out with watching these institutions kind of, turn into like a bit of a dumpster fire a little bit. It's like, well, maybe I should just figure out what is going to fulfill me, figure out what I'm interested in, and kind of drawing towards what we were saying at the beginning of the conversation is like finding what you're invested in and being able to bring your why to the world.
Yeah, I saw this meme where it showed that the prices of I'm going to drop a meme right now. The prices of tuition for some of the top Ivy Leagues in the U.S. And I don't even need to tell you what the price is. We all know it's astronomical, and then it showed the price of like a subscription to like the premium YouTube and kind of like all these basically rabbit holes that are free to use, meaning all this type of information and education that you can access for pretty much free. It's just a matter of going out there and discovering and being curious and doing all those things. So you see that meme of the drastic contrast of like, okay, this university or this education at an Ivy League university costs whatever, $50,000-$60,000 a year. Meanwhile, YouTube is free for the most part. And at the end of the day, like what is educating you more? Is the university educating you, or is it indoctrinating you into some like a thought process that will get you to a certain level, but it will get you to a level where you all of a sudden realize you want to get to that next level. You never really have that like satisfying level. You never really scratch that itch. And the alternative, which is, I'm just using YouTube as an example, but YouTube is like that source of information, and people are really like starting to scratch their head. And going back to this pandemic, people are like sitting at home going, wait, hang on, I'm seeing all these like fresh out of high school kids crush it on these online businesses doing e-commerce and all that type of stuff. They didn't go to college or university or anything. They just like watch some videos on YouTube. And that's a small example, but that starts to make you like scratch your head and go, wait, hang on a second. Is this whole story we've been told to go do all these steps and listen to the media and do all this stuff, is that the right way? And I think a lot of us are saying, no, that's not the right way. We're not sure what the right way is, but we're finally having that epiphany that like, wow, we really need to question what the status quo is.
Yeah. Maybe we don't need to save the earth. Maybe we need to save ourselves. I think
or like that is how we save
here.
Like, save ourselves first. It's that oxygen mask metaphor in the airplane.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. That was actually gonna be the name of my podcast or blog or whatever, was the oxygen mask, and then I came up with Incognito, and I was like, all right, that's better.
Yeah, Incognito is cool. Oxygen mask is like, oh god, like what's going on there? But yeah, it's a good example of like, that's just basic survival. But the majority of us are like trying to strap oxygen masks on everybody else when everyone's looking.
When we're like starving for air.
Yeah, everyone's looking back at us like, you're the problem. Like, I'm the problem. I need to work on myself, and then I'll make everybody else better. And again, psychedelics is that's the other thing about psychedelics that people who have never experienced it don't understand. Like, it's inexplainable. And I know that you probably share the same.
Yeah. Like, oh, what's it like? I don't know. It's going to be different for you.
Yeah.
Your brain.
Exactly. And people want to categorize what this experience is or what is being fixed. But then you're like, well, how can you categorize what's being fixed when every single person has something different that needs to be fixed? But I think the one thing that is consistent is that these drugs, they do something real that is so far that we know of, like almost non-replicatable with other means. Obviously there's companies working on virtual reality and a variety of different types of technologies to trick your brain into entering into this mode of having these psychedelic experiences. And maybe we'll get there one day. Maybe those will work great.
Yeah.
But
now we have the real deal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So how do we open that door to get more access to everybody? And I think that's the question that everybody's trying to solve right now. But that's again why this industry is so dang exciting right now, is because we're looking down that rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland, and we're really close to getting in there, which is
well crazy. We didn't solve the world's problem on this podcast, so maybe the next one, I don't know. But we're getting there. We're having the conversation.
Sustainable.
That's the key. So if people want to learn more about Mr. Sustainable Cody and the stuff that he does and where he is on the internet, where do they go to find you?
Man, I don't even know how to answer that question. Just like, I guess just Google my name, but I don't know. I guess that's part of the Incognito thing. I'm doing a variety of things. And I'm not even going to mention them here just because I'd rather just work on them. And when they become valuable to somebody, they'll become valuable. And I think that's probably the best way to go about it, because we all have individual problems and solutions that we're working on. And then I know that whatever I'm doing will cross paths with people that are meant to see it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And hopefully we can help you out on that one day. I know.
Absolutely.
Lots of calls to discuss it, and I look forward to more of them.
Awesome, Patrick. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate you being the first guest here, man.
Anytime. Guinea Pig is my middle name.
That's it. That's a strange middle name, but I like it. All right, boss. Take care for now.
See ya.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining the Incognito series, brought to you by Microdose and the Conscious Fund. Visit our website at www.microdose.buzz.